Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books this afternoon. We have award-winning and best-selling author Marjory Henderson with us today. She is the author of As Living Stones, My 5 Years in Saudi Arabia. And she is going to spend some time with us to tell us about this amazing experience. Welcome, Marjory, to Zoom into Books.
And thank you, Kathy. It's great to be with you.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. We're so excited. I know that you and some members of my family lived in Saudi Arabia at the same time, so this is a particular honor for me to have you on. I'd like for you to start by telling people how you and your family ended up in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. As I said in the book, help, Lord, we have 2 toddlers and my husband just lost his job. Through downsizing in the company, he was the one who had worked there the shortest amount of time and was released. Well, even though I didn't know the Lord yet, I was laying in bed one morning praying, and the Lord just showed me that everything was going to be okay. So he gave a real peace to me. And within a month, my husband had a new job and we were in Saudi Arabia. The king at that time was King Faisal, and he had the desire to have his country self-sufficient in growing wheat. They eat a lot of pita bread, and I would imagine still do. And so he didn't want any chance for a boycott or anything like that. So Keith was one of the advisors that he had hired through Ford Foundation. And Keith went over and worked with the farmers, showing them how to grow wheat. And naturally, he took me and our 2 sons and he plunked us right down in the middle of Saudi Arabia in the capital. Kathy was asking me to read a little bit from the book, so I thought I would read what I put for the blurb on the back. When I stepped on the plane in Denver, Colorado, I had little idea of the adventure which laid ahead. There was a stop in New York City and a layover in that airport. There was a stop in Rome, Italy, and a layover in that airport. Then it was on to Beirut, Lebanon. That trip took 32 hours. I was exhausted. We were in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a week after landing in Beirut. It was my husband's new job, which caused us to leave the green of Colorado and go to the brown of Saudi Arabia. He plunked our family down in the midst of a nation where 5 times a day prayer calls were heard, where Islam was not just a religion, but was a way of life. He put me in a place where I could exchange my religion for a relationship with the living Lord. Halfway across the world, full of intrigue, holding both joyful and painful experiences, Saudi Arabia became a second home for me. And then I describe myself as a child of God. Then my favorite scripture is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I wanted to tell you too that it was my mom that had encouraged me to write this book. Each week we were in Saudi Arabia for those 5 years, I sent the family a letter. She had saved every one of those letters. I don't know, you maybe can see my fingers. That pile was that thick. So at the time of COVID, I finally had time to put them together, and they became the book that we're talking about today. Kathy was saying to me, and of course it's very true, what happened to us there has some parallels with what's happening now in Afghanistan. we never had to escape like people there have had to do. But there were times, well, we were there during one of the battles between the Arabs and Israel, and we did pack, deciding what was most valuable to us to take on the trip. So that was kind of a parallel in my mind. And of course, the living conditions of the women there, it were very similar. We met Saudis that were very gracious and loving to us. We also met men who was, as we would walk on the streets, would stick their heads out the window and rap on their doors, just yelling at us. We always intentionally and wanted to dress very modestly. But because we weren't in black from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet, they thought we were loose women. And so they were very ugly to us at times. Now, in an opposite view, there was a man at one time, it was in a very heavy dust storm, a lot of unpleasantness. A taxi pulled over, women couldn't drive. So when a taxi pulled over, I was very glad to see it. But then I saw a man sitting in that taxi and knew that there could be a moral problem. There's no way I could get into that taxi. That man got out of the taxi, motioned us to come in, gave us his ride during that bad storm. So we saw opposites of personality, opposites of graciousness, plus very rudeness. And I'm guessing that that's true in Afghanistan as well.
Marge, those are amazing stories. I know that the living was hard at times and rewarding at times. Tell us why you were in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, my husband had taken a job. Ford Foundation was hired by the royal family, King Faisal in particular, to take over people with various expertise in various areas. And my husband was the one that was chosen for agriculture. So after he got there, he worked in various areas of the country. Also, they had a farm, a research farm outside Riyadh, where they were growing various varieties of wheat. He is one of the few men who has made a difference in the world, in that a friend of mine a number of years ago in Bible study fellowship had a brother that was there. He brought a calendar to show me that was full of green, and that green would never have been there. The green was the wheat, and it would never have been there apart from my husband. So I'm very thankful to God for him, and any Saudis that would remember would be very grateful too. He actually had a letter from the king who said, "Thank you for sending the American." And that was my husband.
That's terrific. That really is. For those of you who have not read Marjory's book, it is a #1 best-selling book on Amazon. Marjory's got a copy of it right there. And the book is also available at headlinebooks.com. Those of you who are watching with us on Facebook Live, if you have questions for Marjory Henderson, please type them in the comments, and we'll make sure that we get to your questions before we finish our Zoom into Books today. Marjory, we have some photos from your book that we're going to show on screen, and I'd like for you to tell us the stories behind the photos, please.
Okay. The top two there, one of them is with my some men that worked with my husband preparing ground to plant wheat. In the bottom there, I'm just going from left to right. In the bottom are some dear friends of ours in the desert on a picnic. Now, that reminds me of a funny story. This was where our kids were raised, in this terrain. Well, when we went to Africa, we came in from the airport at night into Nairobi just for a vacation. And our son, who was maybe 3 at the time, looked out the window, and then he looked back and he said, with a voice full of suspicion, "There's something growing out there." So he was not used to seeing anything grow, as you can tell. Now, over on the right hand, the top picture there is some men that my husband worked with, probably various farmers. And as I lean forward, I see that I need to tell you about the shirt I'm wearing. It's a shirt that we bought when we were in Kenya, in Nairobi. My husband had gone out, well, I was roaming the grounds of the beautiful, beautiful landscape with our 2 sons since they were quite small. And my husband came on a shop of a man that had some material. This was material. And he just cut, zip, 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 and put it all together for him and sent him off. Okay, not long ago, I washed that shirt. It's now my size. So I'm the one that gets to wear it.
That's great. Tell me more about, I mean, you know, I grew up in farm country, so to speak. This picture of this tractor in the desert,
Yes.
this is just very foreign looking to those of us who are used to the farmlands in the United States.
Yes.
So was it a technique that your husband developed? Was it fertilizer?
He's sitting right here and he's hearing you. What do you think, kid?
New practices.
He said they were developing new practices. I know they had a new variety of wheat that was supposed to grow well with less water that was developed in Mexico. No, where was it developed, Keith?
In Mexico.
It was developed in Mexico and then sent to Saudi Arabia. And that was one of the things they were trying there. One of the farmers told my husband, "I had so much wheat, I made enough money to buy another wife."
Wonderful.
Crazy, crazy. And I want to go back to that bottom picture too. I forgot to tell you about that. The woman there with red hair is Geta Habish. She's one that we're still in contact with over Zoom every few months. Her husband is the middle man in the other, at the other end of the blanket. His name is Jarius. He's a pastor now in Lebanon. But when we were in Saudi Arabia, they hadn't married yet. But he rode in a taxi an hour each way to get to our small underground church.
Wow. And what year was this, Marge?
Oh boy, I'm terrible on years. Maybe, well, we were there 71 through 76. Okay. So it was during that time. And I think they were there the whole time we were there. And in fact, like I'm saying, are in Jordan now. The couple there on the right are Harvey and Carolyn Dove. When we were baby Christians, they did a lot to help us grow in the Lord. We met them at a party because he had been hired by Ford by the man Konstuki with Ford Foundation. And so after the party, my husband said, "Hey, we've got a new man from Arizona," which is where we had come from at that time. And I said, "Well, even better than that, they know the Lord." And so like I'm saying, they were part of that underground church. And he was the one who taught the kids in Sunday school. I don't know if you remember that song, but it goes, "The Lord said to Noah, build me an arky." So he taught the kids that.
Oh, that's great.
Taught them a song of the books of the Bible. So at 4 years old, since the Sunday school group was so small, our 4-year-old was in with the others, and he knew the books, all the books of the Bible through a song when he was 4 years old. So
That's great. Let's move on to the next
sure.
slide.
Okay, again, it's my husband, and this time he's eating with the farmers. They would sometimes have what they called a go grab, and just put out food out in the middle on the rug, and then people would just grab and eat anything they wanted. The one below that is our son, our older son, Craig, getting some affection from the horse out at the experimental farm. The one to the right, they are digging a well by hand. There would be a donkey at the other end of that rope. It would go down the pulley. They would lower a man down into where they were digging. He would fill the bucket with dirt, which the donkey would then move backwards, pull it out, and bucket by bucket by bucket, they dug and dug till they got to water, which was a long, long ways down.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's move on.
Okay, you can tell our son didn't like Santa Claus. We had been very careful to tell him that Santa Claus was pretend. But when we got back out in the car, I reminded him again, Santa Claus is pretend, because we wanted to focus on Jesus. Santa Claus is pretend. He said, but Mrs. Santa Claus is real. That's his preschool there at the bottom. He is the one next to the little girl in red and white. His brother's the one right in front of him. There they are with some costumes that we had made for Halloween. He's the one that's the bunny. Up in the top are some people. Well, the woman with black skin is an American. The other one, I think, was Lebanese. And we would get together for bridge games.
So, Marge, these pictures look very normal. I mean, they look like they could be taken in America, or so was there an American school that your children went to?
There was an international school, and it actually was a very good school, because instead of just automatically putting kids into with their age group, they would test them to find out, well, and our son, who was old enough for school at that point, could already read. So they put him then in with the reading group, and it was a very good system in that it was specific to the needs of each child.
So were the teachers foreign or American?
Well, the teachers were whoever happened to live there at that time.
Okay.
I was a substitute music teacher, knowing just what I knew until the woman moved in who actually was to take the position. We just did the best we can. Our school was in a house, and the nurse's office was the bathroom. And one of the kids came in one time, she said, I need to use the bathtub when she needed to go to the bathroom. So we had some funny stories from that time.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, again, farmers. The one at the left, the one at the bottom is a man down at Harad, which was a place that King Faisal hoped the Bedouin would move and live, although they never did. Anyway, they were readying that land for irrigation. The top one, of course, is the pyramids. We were blessed to be able to visit in all sorts of different areas. One was seeing the pyramids in Egypt.
That's great. Let's move on.
The left there is my husband with 2 Saudis, and the sign says something about Arabic Ministry of Agriculture. In, of course, Arabic script. You can see it's completely different from ours. Below is the Camels Souk. Well, the souk was an area where different different like items would be sold in one area. This was the Camels Souk, where the Saudis were coming in to sell and buy camels. On the right was King Faisal. He was shot and killed by a nephew while we were there. And the American community grieved, as did the Saudi group, because he was such a wonderful man and such a help to their nation. The foreign women were invited to the palace after his death and were greeted by the Queen. So we had unbelievable experiences. There is no way that Mrs. Biden would greet me. And yet here, King Faisal's wife did that for us.
Oh, that's amazing. So were there different souks for different products?
Yes.
And were the women able to go shop?
Well, we could not drive, like I said, so we always had a man with us. We always had a driver or a husband to take us. On the right there, you can see from the materials souk, these little one-room stores were open fronted, and there would be a dirt lane in front of them, and say basically one item, with the storekeeper having the room small enough he could reach almost everything in his for sale just by sitting on the same chair.
Wow.
The left there is the Kaaba inside Mecca, which they consider their most holy place. This is the place in the center that they consider holiest of all. The one on the top there, I'm not remembering what that one is, so you'll just have to guess.
Okay.
Looks like it might be a palace or something, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Belinda. So Marge, tell us, what was the hardest living experience that you had to overcome there?
Well, again, I think it was the man yelling at us out of the cars. I just, one night, we had prayer group, Harvey Dove, who you saw in one of those pictures, but wouldn't remember. He said that there should be Christians meeting all day Sunday for 24 hours around the world. Now, the Saudis met for their service on Fridays, so that was the day that we would have church service as well. But Sunday nights, we met in our home, and I just remember sitting there crying because it had been so hard, you know, to endure some of that stuff. There was another experience where I was just going a short ways and by taxi, and didn't have either one of our sons with me. And the driver made a grab for me, and I said, "Law, law," which meant no, no. And he backed off. But that, of course, was very difficult as well.
Absolutely. We do have a question, which I think you touched on a little bit, to describe the activities of the Christian community that thrived in Riyadh.
Yes, we had a wonderful community. We were people of all different nationalities, joined by our love of Jesus. We did our, well, the man took turns, any who wanted, giving the sermons from week to week, except for the exceptional weeks where we had somebody come down from the oil community in Tehran or Beirut, Lebanon, who were actually official, and that they could then give a more official service, serve the Lord's Supper and that kind of thing. The men as a whole from our group did a very good job in preaching. Although sometimes it was kind of hard to understand through their accents. So we had a great group there. Great Bible study. prayer times together. It was a great place to grow as a Christian.
And very difficult. I mean, it's hard enough to be away from home
Yes.
when you're in similar surroundings. So, so you did travel. You got to go to Egypt.
Yes, yes. We
What
went to
other-
Egypt. We went to Cyprus. Cyprus, we actually were in a war. We were coming back from having done the last of our souvenir shopping, headed back to the hotel. My husband knew it was gunfire he was hearing, so we hurried along, carrying our kids as quickly as we could go. There was a woman who motioned us into her house. On their dining room table was a machine gun. And so they knew something was going to be coming up. Well, when my husband decided we should go back to our motel, we each carried a child and ran across a vacant lot. And he told me later the gunshots were so close, he could hear them ricocheting. So the Lord really preserved our lives during that.
That's so scary. I know a lot of the Americans had similar experiences, particularly after the death of King Faisal.
Well, and in Afghanistan again, too. You hear about them trying to get off riding on the airplanes and that kind of thing.
That's right. That's right. So how did your children fare? I know children are very resilient.
Yes,
Did they just go with the flow?
They
were they
did.
able to,
yes. Craig was barely 2.5 when we went over. Curtis was 3 months. So for 5 years, that was what was typical for them. When they came back to the States, they were able to get into the culture. Like you said, children are very resilient. They had no problems at all. I had great problems because when we went over, people knew what you were going through and helped you. When we came back, nobody knew what we were going through. And I cried a lot then too. But kind of a fun story. Our older son was in 2nd grade when we got back. And his social studies teacher had asked in a true false question, people around the world are pretty much the same. And Craig had put false, and she counted it wrong. But what she didn't realize is that she had seen multiple wives sitting in the back of pickup trucks with black from head to toe. You know, people around the world were not a whole lot the same. She was probably meaning inequalities. And of course, that's true. But externally, people are very different.
it depends on where you grow up.
Yes, it does.
The
Yes, it
culture,
does.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So did you live within a community of Americans?
No, we didn't. And I, even at the time, felt I wouldn't want to. If I was going to be overseas, I wanted the taste of it. So we were right in the same community as everybody else. We had the 8-foot wall around our house to keep men from seeing me and from Keith seeing other women, you know, that live next door. Kind of a funny story on that. We had Canadian neighbors next door. And one day I was out in the side and realized our neighbor was across the wall too. I said, our son doesn't have on diapers. I hope you can't see him. He said, I don't have on a diaper either. I hope he can't see me.
That's funny. What about conveniences? Electric, water. I know
Yes.
groceries were a struggle a lot of times. Tell us about that.
Well, the grocery stores had most items. They just didn't have them when you needed them. Like we would ask for candied fruit to make fruit cakes, and they would arrive 3 months later, you know. But as a whole, we were able to get what we wanted. And it was kind of fun to me to see, you know, those little Pez candy things that kids have here. They were also in Saudi Arabia. So they have lasted through all cultures and time frames as well. We would go down to the souk, the vegetable souk, because they had the freshest vegetables. Down on Chicken Street, they had rotisserie chickens that were delicious. And they also had shawarmas, which were big hunks of lamb that they would slice off and put in a pita bread that were delicious. So we did pretty well as far as food and all of that. As far as water, we would, we never could drink the water because there were holes in the pipes and bad stuff could get into the water. So we always had water delivered. They would deliver to an underground tank that pumped up to the flat roof, and they would store up there. It was so hot most of the times of the year that we used our hot water for our cold water because the hot water coming out of the tanks was so hot. And when we couldn't get enough water, we just used dishwater, you know, to throw on plants outside and all of that kind of stuff, just making do as well as we were able.
What about electricity? Was it steady? Was it good?
Most of the time it was. Occasionally it would go off, but most of the time it was good. And we did need our swamp coolers too, and we're very thankful for them.
What's a swamp cooler?
Well, kind of like an electric air conditioner, only they just kind of sat in the windows of the house and cooled off some.
So the heat's very dry there, so that
Yes,
had to be difficult too.
Yes, you would step out and it would just feel like every liquid in your body would be sucked out.
Did you get to the cities? What city was nearby?
Well, Riyadh, we were right in the middle of Riyadh,
Okay.
and it was the capital. So we went up once to the north where Dhahran had its into Dhahran, where Aramco, the oil company combined with American and Saudi, was up there. They actually had a city in Aramco with a wall around it where the women were allowed to drive, where they argued about what color their door on their fence would be painted. You know, we thought they were pretty spoiled up there because we had more basic needs. But yes, it was a very positive time for us all in all.
So your husband's work, he hired local people to work, or the firm that he was with did?
Now, I don't remember you hiring any local people.
No, the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah, he worked with the Ministry of Agriculture, and actually it was the farmers that he would work with at the farms would actually do their own labor. We did have houseboys, which was kind of nice. They would come in and clean your house and all. I missed that too when we got back in the States.
That is a benefit. What about childcare?
Yes, yes, yeah. We had a very sad story in that one of our houseboys, he was just very special with the kids, left them right on the vacuum cleaner and all of that. We learned at one point that he had died from drinking cologne for the alcohol content. Yeah, very, very sad.
That is very sad. So you were there for 5 years. Did you come directly back to the United States?
Yes, we had thought about maybe doing another overseas somewhere. A lot of people that we knew had been in more than one location and tended to like the others better. But what really convinced my husband was when our second grader said, "Dad, what's baseball?" And he thought, we need to get back to the States.
That's interesting. So when you came back, how old were your children?
Second grade and kindergarten. Yeah.
And did you resume teaching when you got back?
Not for a while, but pretty soon after that. I always just substitute taught. And that was just the very, very best life for me because I could have a day off whenever I wanted to. I went to a weekly Bible study, just told them I wasn't available on Wednesdays. You know, I did that first in public school. And then when our kids started going to Bay Area Christian, I did it out there. And I tell people I subbed out there for 100 years.
Wow. As someone who knows you has asked a question. They say that you tutored a princess. You taught her English at the
Yes.
palace. Tell us
Yes.
that story.
Yes. I think it was partly the boredom factor. You saw 100 men on the street for every woman. And even among the princesses, they just didn't get out much. So she actually hired me to come in once a week just to help her learn English. And we just chat, you know, nothing official or written or anything like that. We would just chat. She was very interested in bath mats because she found that they had wonderful bath mats in the States. So she asked me to bring her some when I went back to Saudi Arabia. And I of course, packed them in our suitcase and gave her some bath mats.
Well, that's interesting. What were her interactions with the Saudi women? Did she go out? Did she?
You know, it's a long time ago, and I don't remember that specifically. Mostly the entertainment was just men would go out to men's parties at night. When there were like a wedding in the palace or something, we went among other women. There were hundreds of us shoved body to body, you know, when one of the princesses was being married. But as far as what they did among themselves, I really don't know or don't remember that.
What did the interior of the palaces look like?
Beautiful, except for the bathroom. The bathroom looked like every other bathroom, and there was a hole in the middle of the floor where it slanted down where they would wash the floor. They could scoop it all down that hole. But other than that, you know, they were very decorative, richly decorative. That is something I remember about the weddings. The gowns would be just gorgeous, like sequins all over, except instead of sequins, it would be jewels. And there was one gown that was completely covered in patterns, geometric patterns with emeralds. And I think it was the bride herself. No, the bride was dressed like an American bride, so it may have been her mother, had diamonds in the pattern all over her dress. Yes, the wealth was fantastic.
That's amazing.
Since the oil boom is over, they're not as wealthy a nation as they were when we were there.
And the oil boom happened while you were there, didn't it?
Yes.
I remember that too. Well, Marge, we're just about at the end of our time. I want to thank you so much for coming on Zoom Into Books. I would like to thank the people who were with us on Facebook
Yes,
Live.
definitely.
And
if I can make just one other brief comment, my mother, who encouraged me to write the book, had herself kept a record of all the books she had read since junior high years, and it was a total of 5,327. She was a remarkable woman.
That is amazing. I have never known anyone who wrote down all the books that they have read. I think that's very special. I really do. And Marge, I know as a teacher, you're familiar with the classroom. I am sure if people would like to get in touch with Marge, they can contact Headline Books, and we will put you in touch with Marge if you'd like to have Marge come to your classroom, or maybe do a virtual visit like we're doing here on Zoom into Books today.
I would love to do that.
Families living in other cultures is fascinating and an opportunity that a lot of us do not get. So I encourage people to pick up a copy of As Living Stones. It's available on headlinebooks.com. It's available on Amazon and other online stores. And Marge, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and that you come back to visit us again on Zoom into Books.
Thanks, great.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Facebook.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you, Kathy. Bye.